The year is 1995. Bill Clinton was just elected into office. Both Forrest Gump and The Lion King just came out in movie theaters during that summer. But all of these events are going to be overshadowed by one important court case. The people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. O.J. Simpson, this case was a very important case as O.J. Simpson was a retired football star, former Heisman winner, who was accused of killing his ex-wife and her new boyfriend. So today we'll see what exactly the crime was, why the trial was so important in American history, and what happened afterwards. So, during the summer of 1994, on July 14th, 1994, just past midnight, a man was walking his dog down the street, and he saw a pair of bloody footprints outside the house. In those footprints, he eventually found the bodies of Nicole Brown and Michael uh, Michael Smith. He then called 911, and three detectives showed up to the case. There they found the Nicole Simpson, who was married to O.J. Simpson just 7 months prior, and their two kids were still in the house when the murders happened. After this, the detectives went over to Mr. Simpson's house to notify him of his ex-wife's death, but instead found a bloody glove in his driveway and bloodstains on his car. After this, O.J. Simpson was a prime suspect. He was taken into questioning, and not even a day later, he was on the run with his former teammate and friend A.C. Collins. After a day of a slow-paced car chase down the interstate, O.J. eventually turned himself in, and the trial of the century was set to start. For this trial, since O.J. Simpson had amassed so much wealth from his previous football seasons, and because he was so famous in his LA community, and more particularly the Black community, because he came from nothing and built himself up to this amazing person. He was able to employ the help of many skilled and top-level lawyers who he referred to as a dream team. They had Johnny Cochran, Paul Newman, and Ben Shapiro, and Robert Kardashian. For the prosecution side, they had Doug Coleman, who was Johnny Cochran's former student, and Barbara Simmons. So as the trial went on, the prosecution thought they had a set case, as they had the bloody glove that was at both crime scenes. They had the blood on the OJ's car, and they had a history of long domestic disputes between Nicole and O.J. Simpson. But the prosecution had other ideas, and they slowly tore every single piece of evidence down until the jury had no choice but to dismiss it from court. First, they started with the blood evidence. Paul Newman was a DNA expert, and through his testimony, he said that there could have easily been a contamination between when OJ gave his blood sample and the crime scene. And so because of that, the jury had to dismiss the idea of the blood samples matching. And then after that, O.J. Simpson himself decided to try on the gloves to show the jury that he thought that they would not fit. And so because of that, the jury dismissed the gloves as even being able to be worn by him. Finally, after all of this, the head detective, Mark Furman, was on the stand for testimony. And during this testimony, one of the defense lawyers uncovered a set of tapes where Furman himself is heard confessing to planting evidence against racial minorities, including people of OJ's own neighborhood. And because of this, because of all this evidence, there was no surprise when the jury came back after only 2 hours of deliberation and acquitted O.J. Simpson of these two brutal murders. But not all was lost for the families of the victims, as not even a year later, the parents of Nicole Brown's boyfriend sued and won a civil courts case where OJ was fined $33.5 million and was forced to retire in Florida so that the rest of his assets weren't taken away. And then the court case also sprung a lot of other people into the shining light. Like one lawyer, Robert Kardashian, became famous because of this case, and that led to his daughters all becoming famous and starring in their own TV show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And then Paul Newman, another lawyer on the defense team, founded the Innocence Project, which, according to their own official website, has acquitted over 300 people of crimes because of faulty DNA evidence. And finally, after not even 10 years or 20 years later, after he was acquitted, O.J. Simpson was caught in New Vegas trying to steal sports memorabilia of him and was sentenced to 33 years in prison and was finally just released 2 years ago after 9 years on parole. Overall, this trial of the century was a very important part of the history of the 90s and the history of the U.S. From the two murders of Nicole Brown and Michael Smith to the year-long debacle that was the O.J. Simpson trial, to all the people that it brought towards the limelight, and also the eventual fall of Simpson himself.
Shut up, the hard killer. Thank you, Daniel. All right, let's see.